Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome back to another new episode of The Lager Line, again served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing. I'm Ben Dubose, your host, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire, and contributor to Sports Talk 790, official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets. Paulo Alves, my usual co-host and producer out of Portugal, is on vacation for a few days, so longer discussions will have to wait until he's back next week. But I did want to put out an episode in the interim with immediate reaction to the big news, which is that the Rockets, for the first time in 5 years, are back in the NBA playoffs. And for the first time in 6 years, there will be playoff basketball played in Houston, Texas. That's because Wednesday night, the Rockets took care of business at home against the Utah Jazz. That gave them their 50th win of the season. And so because of that, they could no longer be passed by the Memphis Grizzlies, who have a 44-32 record and only 6 games left to play. So they can max out at 50 wins. Rockets already have 50, and Rockets have the tiebreaker because they took 3 of 4 from Memphis this season. So Houston secures its top 6 seed because Memphis is tied for the 6 and 7 slots, and the Rockets can no longer fall below them. But because Memphis is the second place team in the Southwest Division, Rockets also clinched the division title for the first time in 5 years, and only the 9th time in nearly 60 years as a professional basketball franchise. So a monumental day across the board for the Rockets. 50 wins, division title, playoff berth, all of it happening courtesy of a home win against Utah by 38 points, where even Reed Shepherd got to be your victory cigar with 5 threes in the fourth quarter. So much to like. And in some ways, even though there was a frustrating loss to the Lakers, I will get to that a couple of nights earlier, the fact that you got to celebrate at home, that everyone got involved, that you were able to basically do 3-1 with the playoff clinching win, the division clinching win, and the round number, a symbolic one of 50, I think clearly showing the Rockets have reached another level in this rebuild. And it's not really a rebuild anymore because at number 2 in the Western Conference, 50-27 with 5 regular season games left to play, they're no longer rebuilding. They're here. So I'll try and be quick since it's just me, but my main message that I would convey to the fan base, celebrate this. Imagine if someone told you last summer that the Rockets would win 50 games, win the division, have their playoff seed locked up with 5 games still to play. They could get to as many as 55 wins. This was a group that had an over-under number of 43.5 going into the season. Yeah, they went 41-41 last year and had a lot of young talent, but the Western Conference is deep. To get to 50-plus wins in a conference this strong is not easy to do. And I don't care what they do in the playoffs. Well, I guess if they get swept and like everyone plays poorly and the average margin of defeat is like 30 points per game, I guess that might take a little bit of the shine off. But more realistically, even if they go out in round 1, okay, well, most young teams have to take their lumps in the playoffs before they truly get to a contending level. The Thunder were the best team in the West in the regular season a year ago, and they lost in 5 in the second round to Dallas. This stuff happens. So I would celebrate this. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're tuning in to a marathon sport like the NBA that has 82 regular season games, it can't all be dependent on the playoffs in terms of how you feel about your team, especially if they are this young. The whole idea for the Rockets throughout this rebuild has been not to shortcut the process, that by drafting and developing talent in-house, you can have a sustainable contender. Those are the 2 words that ever since this rebuild launched in early 2021 that I've heard from Toyota Center more than any others. Sustainable contender. It's not all about this playoff run, and especially not for a team that's this young. You will have more chances. That doesn't mean they can't do something special this year. Crazier things have happened. But if things don't go well, okay, teams have to take their lumps. They have lots of young players. The core 7, when we talk about guys drafted in the first round of the last 4 NBA draft cycles, they're all 23 years old or younger. 3 or the 7 are in their first or second seasons. So there's plenty of upward mobility, even if things don't go well in the playoffs. You've got the future Phoenix picks because Rafael Stone made a really shrewd deal with the Brooklyn Nets last offseason. And so if you think you need to go out and get a Kevin Durant or some sort of proven difference maker to help elevate this current team to the next level in a year or so, well, you'll have the ability to do that this summer if you think you need to. This is not the end. This is the beginning. And so to check all of these boxes at the start of the journey, I think ahead of even where the Rockets internally thought they would be in early 2025, this is a day and it's a season that you should celebrate. And I don't think anything that happens in the playoffs, and I'm not saying I think it's going to go poorly. I'm just exploring even the realistic worst case scenario. You go down to a good team in round one of a strong Western Conference. I don't think it's going to dramatically change the optimism that you're feeling right now, which is completely justified. To be ahead of schedule at this point, it's almost like house money in terms of the upcoming playoff run. I think if you're number 2 in the West, they are capable of winning a series, maybe multiple series. I think this team, it's not fluky. They have the second best point differential in the Western Conference. So they can absolutely make some noise. They do need to get Fred VanVleet healthy. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I just think at this point, the symbolic number of 50, being a division champion, potentially getting as many as 55 wins, having your playoff seed locked up with 2 weeks almost left to play. It's a momentous occasion for a franchise that this decade, they bottomed out, and it was not pretty, and it was difficult for all of us to get through, but we did, and now they're on the other side. Realistically, they've been on the other side ever since they hired Ime Udoka in the 2023 offseason, brought in the veterans like Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, Jeff Green. But I think checking all of those boxes, 50 wins, division title, playoff berth, all in one night at home at Toyota Center, where the Rockets, by the way, are 28-11 this season. So if they get home court in the playoffs, and it looks like they're going to be in position to have it at least for one round, hopefully more than that, which they'd be in position to do if they're the number 2 seed as they are at the moment, then yeah, they'll have every opportunity to make some noise. And I think for a team that hasn't, for the most part, Fred and Dylan excluded from this, they haven't taken their lumps in the postseason, it will help being able to sort of dip their toes in the water at home before having the full-fledged experience of playing on the road in a super hostile environment in a game that has playoff intensity on both ends of the floor. So a lot to like. I only explored the downside scenarios to point out that, hey, even if the worst case happens from here forward, I think at this point, this year is a resounding success no matter what. And from this point forward, it's just about seeing how far ahead of schedule they are. In terms of realistic expectations, what our hopes were going into the year, they are already ahead of schedule. It is already an A or A plus level year, no matter what happens the rest of the way. Again, if it's something insane where they get swept and the average margin is like 30 points per game and everyone plays poorly, I guess that's the one scenario where it's not, but I personally don't think it's realistic. And even if somehow that did happen, then okay, you do have other upgrades or other avenues to upgrade your team, be it through internal growth of these young guys. You will learn about them no matter what in the playoffs, or externally being able to go out and make a big move and bring in a difference maker that can potentially take you to that next level. So I think this is a week that you should celebrate everything that has come with being a Rockets fan this decade. There have been a lot of lows. And so if you stuck it out and you go through the grind of watching the majority of 82 game regular seasons, if you care enough to listen to a podcast like this, you shouldn't let whatever happens in the playoffs, especially with a team this young and with this much potential to get better, both internally and externally moving forward. This is a home run no matter what, this 24-25 season for the Rockets. And we should also note they've gotten better as the year moves along. We can talk about all the benchmarks that they cleared. They're now 13-2 in their last 15 games. So on top of the overall season-long numbers, their position in the West, the fact that they're playing their best ball when it means the most, we know the lumps they took at midseason. They had a lot of injuries. They had that stretch in early February where they lost 6 straight games. To come out on the other side and to go 13-2 in their last 15 down the home stretch of this season, I think it shows you that And in some ways, it's like a microcosm of the rebuild as a whole. You take your lumps, but when you zoom out and look at not just the macro or not just the micro, but the macro, the upward trajectory is clear. They are rising quickly, and it's a week that's just a really, really good time to be a Rockets fan. So I would urge you to celebrate. I would say even the loss earlier this week to the Lakers, it didn't really bother me. I mean, for starters, night two of a back-to-back, they don't have any more of those. We know that's been an issue all year long for a few reasons. This is a team that depends on having peak effort, which is difficult to do on night two of a back-to-back, especially on the road. 7 and 10 in those 17 second night of a back-to-back settings. No more of those. I thought the officiating was terrible as well. And yet you were right there within a possession in the final minute of the game. This was not like the Denver game, which did bother me. And we talked about that on the last pod a little over a week ago when they were down 19. They didn't seem to have a plan for covering Jamal Murray. There were lapses in focus and competitiveness. I thought that Lakers game, the Rockets took it very seriously, even having some tired legs. I think the adrenaline of being on national TV, the spotlight against LeBron James, Luka Doncic, they responded to that. And I saw some national takes trying to frame it as, oh, the Lakers have proven closers and LeBron and Luka. We know the questions with the Rockets. Do they have an A1? Jalen Green did just win his second Western Conference Player of the Week award, but he wasn't great against the Lakers. Just 9 points, 9 rebounds, I think shot 4 of 12, something like that. And he ultimately didn't close the game. That's really not what decided the game. The Rockets were down 7 with a little over 6 minutes left. So this was not a matter of the Lakers just out executing the Rockets when it mattered most and superstars being the difference. No, the Rockets got very close multiple times, cut it to 2, 3 points. They couldn't get over the hump. The problem was the hill they had to climb. The Lakers, from about the midway point of the game to the middle part of the fourth quarter, put some distance between themselves and the Rockets. And it wasn't that, the Rockets just didn't have the guy that could take over the game. No, it's that the Rockets strategically left open certain Lakers, Dorian Finney-Smith, Gabe Vincent. You have to give up something if you're going to commit the resources to force LeBron and Luka into inefficient games, which they did. The Rockets decided they would live with shots from Dorian Finney-Smith and Gabe Vincent, and they went out and made 6 threes apiece, shot 12 of 24. That's tough to do. I don't care where the looks are coming from. The Rockets dared those guys to make shots, and they did. And conversely, the Lakers dared Fred VanVleet to make a lot of shots, and he didn't. He shot 2 of 14, 1 of 7 from 3. And we now know, because he sat out Wednesday's game against Utah, he was dealing with ankle and knee issues. So the Rockets, they started the game going through Alperen Şengün. We know the gravity that Jalen Green has on a nightly basis. And even if you want to say that Jalen Green underachieved against the Lakers, which he did, okay, well, I would say Amen Thompson overachieved with 20 points and had some tough buckets down the stretch. I would say the 3 of those, Jalen, Şengün, and Amen, those are your primary advantage generators on offense. And then Jabari Smith Jr. coming in off the bench had a promising game against the Lakers as well. So those are the guys from a Houston perspective that generate your advantages. And so you need your other players on the floor with them to make shots in much the same way that for the Lakers, LeBron and Luka are the advantage generators, and the Rockets, Amen Thompson and Dylan Brooks did a good job at the point of attack, but they also had some help. And so the Rockets dared certain guys to beat them, and the Lakers had 2 guys step up and make shots at a high level. Tip your hat to them. And conversely, the Rockets generated some advantages with Jalen, Şengün, and Amen, your 3 promising young talents with a lot of creativity and athleticism. And not enough of the Rockets supporting cast made their open looks off of the gravity, off of the attention that their big 3 drew. And with Fred, again, it's not just the LA game. His final 5 games before sitting out against Utah, he had shot just 25% from the field and 25% from 3. So all in all, the Lakers had 2 of their role players step up and make 6 threes apiece, combined to shoot 12 of 24 from behind the arc. Fred VanVleet shot 2 of 14 overall and 1 of 7 from 3. The fact that the Rockets were even close, given those splits, tells you how hard they played, how well they played defensively, offensively. Even if you want to say Jalen underachieved, I'd say Amen probably overachieved a little bit. All in all, it was a promising showing on the road, night 2 back-to-back, bad officiating, all of that stuff. And the Rockets were still right there. And so, unlike the Denver game, I don't have a lot of concerns. It was frustrating to lose the way the Rockets did, but I don't think they got outcoached. I don't think there was an effort problem. I think the Lakers role players just made a few more shots at home in a game where they had a rest advantage as well. I think you just sort of tip your cap, and if the Rockets play the Lakers again, and they will next Friday, I like the Rockets' chances. I think it's a pretty good matchup for them. And so in contrast to that Denver game, where I did think there were a few alarming things in terms of the lineups that Ime Udoka ran out there, the focus they played or more accurately didn't play with, I think against the Lakers, it was a lot better, and a good team just went out and got a win. Sometimes that happens. I don't see any real reason to be alarmed by it, especially when 2 nights later we saw how the Rockets responded. I know the Jazz are bad. They're 16-60. Well, it's not easy to beat any NBA team by 40, and the Rockets went out and did that, and they got to celebrate a bit in the postgame locker room as a result. So I think all in all, it's been a very good week, even with that loss. It's clearly been a very good season for the reasons outlined earlier. As far as the final 5 games, the big elephant in the room for me is the health of Fred VanVleet, because barring an extreme injury, and I don't think that's what we're dealing with, it's more of a nagging situation, he's not going to not play. The contract has some role in it, but it's more just his stature in the league, and he does provide some value. The intangibles are real. They're not going to just bench the guy and not play him at all or dramatically scale down his role. Now, I would argue, and I think they're open to this, if it's not going well, should you play him 25 to 30 minutes instead of 35 to 40? Yeah, there's no reason he should be going out there and playing 40-ish minutes per game if he's not shooting well. As I said in the last pod, let's not Martin Maldonado this. But assuming he's relatively healthy, and Ime Udoka said when he sat out Wednesday, Fred, that is, that the ankle/knee issues are something he's probably going to have to deal with the rest of the season and try to manage. It's not that uncommon at this stage of an NBA season. When we talk about ligament issues, which a sprain inherently entails, and if they miss a month or more, as Fred did, it's clearly not a grade 1. Realistically, you need until the off season to get fully healthy, to let it completely heal. There's a level that you can play with, and that's what Fred has gotten back to. But in terms of being fully healthy all the way back, that doesn't happen until you have a month or more usually to rest. And that's just not realistic at this point of the season. And it's not just Fred. Guys all around the NBA are going through the same challenges. And it should help that there are no more back-to-backs. I don't think it's a coincidence that this especially flared up after the Rockets had that road back-to-back in Phoenix and LA. But I do think it's something that with the Rockets now having a lead of some significance, in addition to the Rockets taking care of business Wednesday, we got some very unexpected help from Denver, where the Spurs, who are largely in tank mode without Wemby, went in and beat the Nuggets. Russell Westbrook, Rockets legend, not only did he lose the game for the Nuggets on Tuesday, against Minnesota with the missed layup and then the foul of a 3-point shooter in the final second, he effectively lost the game Wednesday as well, or I should say the loss for Denver because of Russell Westbrook and because of the way it went down on Tuesday ended up forcing them to lose Wednesday as well, because after a double overtime game that ended after midnight, so many tired legs, it didn't make sense for the Nuggets to play all their big guys like Jamal Murray, like Nikola Jokic on night 2 of a back-to-back. And so the shorthanded Nuggets went out there and lost to the Spurs as well. That's a game that you would never think on paper had any chance to go the Rockets' way in terms of, the standings race being a top 2, top 3 seed. We know the Rockets are competing with teams like the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Warriors. And to get that help from the Denver Nuggets, it's unexpected, and it gives the Rockets a little bit of a luxury when it comes to how they navigate these final 5 games of the season, because you're now up 3 games in the loss column over the Nuggets. You're up 2 games in the loss column against the Lakers, pending what happens in Lakers-Warriors later tonight. That's certainly a losable game, with only 5 games left to play. So even though it's difficult for the Rockets, you look at their closing schedule, and they've got the Thunder, the Warriors, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Nuggets. For starters, I would say the final week of the year, it may not be as difficult as it looks on paper. I know they've got this challenge in close. Statistically, it ranks as one of the toughest in the entire league. Well, in the final week of the year, a lot of these teams, even if they're competing for seeding, are going to be proactive with resting guys a week before the playoffs, especially those teams, and most of these are veteran-laden. The Warriors with Steph, the Clippers with Kawhi and James Harden, the Lakers with LeBron and Luka, the Nuggets with Jokic. The Thunder, I guess, they're the one team that's not super veteran laden, but they have such a massive lead. We'll see how aggressively they go after that game on Friday in Houston. But the point is, just as we saw the Nuggets sort of pull back against the Spurs, in a Western Conference that is this deep, to where any team you draw other than maybe Memphis, given the coaching change and the way they have fallen apart down the stretch of the season, and I don't know what seed you'll need to be in, potentially draw them. They may not even make the playoffs, depending on how they fare in the play-in tournament, because they're now tied for the 7th spot. It's going to be difficult. You're going to need to execute. And so these teams that are dependent on veteran stars may rest them over the final week of the season. So the schedule for the Rockets probably isn't going to be as difficult as it looks on paper. But even if it is, to have a 3-game lead with a week, 5 games left to play, that's pretty significant. If you go to playoffstatus.com, which simulates based on team strength the remainder of the season and spits out probabilities, they have the Rockets as a 98% probability to be a top 3 seed and 85% at number 2. That is pretty massive. Less than 1% is the possibility of them falling to 5, which would be not having home court advantage. So the Rockets, they'll play their first home playoff game since May of 2019. They will most likely open in Houston on Saturday the 19th or Sunday the 20th. And so I talked in the last pod about how first you've got to get in the top 6. That's the bare minimum. Then the second benchmark is being in the top 4, making sure you open at home. And then the third benchmark, what makes the close to the season an absolute A, is getting in the top 3. Well, the first benchmark is mathematically cleared. And the second benchmark, being in the top 4, is quite literally at 99% now. And the third benchmark, which is top 3, being on the opposite side of the bracket from the Thunder and having home court advantage, is now at 98%. Even if that might be a little bit strong for at least my taste when I look at how difficult the close is on paper, the point is it is very likely. Even if it's not 98%, it is very, very likely the Rockets are going to be on the opposite side of the bracket from the Thunder. They're going to get home court advantage. They've taken care of business. And so because of that, they can be a little more proactive with any injury situations out there. And this Fred VanVleet situation, look, when he came back from the ankle injury at the start of March, or in the middle of March, because he had the 1-game comeback against Sacramento where he re-aggravated it by stepping on the ref's foot in the first minute of the game. He came back, and in the first 6 games after March 12th, he averaged about 17 points per game on 45% overall shooting and 45% from 3. And the Rockets went 6-0. And some of that, of course, was that insane game in Miami where he scored 37, basically won it by himself along with Amin Thompson, and I think shot 9 of 11 from 3. But it wasn't just that game. He was over 40% his first 2 games back. He had 5 threes against Chicago. By the way, if the Rockets get a top 3 or top 2 seed, send a Christmas card to the Chicago Bulls, who beat the Lakers twice, won at Denver. That game, the Rockets beat the Bulls on night 2 of back-to-back in mid-March was a better win than I think we realized at the time. And Fred had 5 threes in that game. So the first 6 games, when Fred came back, there was some up and down, and certainly the Miami game influenced his numbers positively. By the way, I always hate when people say, well, if you take out X good game, here's what the average would be. Well, you can do that with anybody. Just as if you say, well, if you take out the bad game, you can make a player look really good. No, you look at the averages. And so the first 6 games, the first week and a half or so, it was very positive. And then from the Miami post game forward, the 5 games since, that's where it's been really bad. He shot about 25% from the field, 25% from 3. And you could argue that perhaps the Rockets had to lean on him a bit too much to get that win in Miami. And he's worn down since, especially with the road back-to-back earlier this week in Phoenix and LA. And so because the Rockets have such a commanding lead to accomplish their goals, top 3 seed, home court in at least 1 round, opposite side of the bracket from the Thunder, 85% probability to be a top 2 seed, even considering the difficulty of their closing schedule, I think they need to be very careful with Fred VanVleet. We'll see if he plays Friday against Oklahoma City. It may not be just about does he play or does he not. It could also be how many minutes does he play. Do you perhaps limit him to 25 or so? Maybe you let him play a couple of games this weekend and then try and give him some rest right before the playoffs. There's multiple ways you can play it. But I think the macro takeaway here, Fred was pretty good when he came back starting March 12th. The Rockets went 6-0 in that 6-game sample that I referenced, which was punctuated by that win against the Heat. And then they lost 2 games, and Fred's efficiency fell off a cliff in the 5 games after, which culminated with that loss to the Lakers on Monday night when he was 2 of 14. So I think we've seen all year long, even if Jalen, Alpi, and Şengün are your primary advantage generators, the Rockets benefit when they have Fred in peak form. There's a reason why 2 of their best wins of the year, the home one against the Cavs and the one against Oklahoma City, also at home in early December, Fred went off in those games with 30+ on elite shooting from 3-point range. When you pair the young talents with Fred at his best, that's when this team gets to the next level. When they have the defense, and honestly, I say at their best, they've been a top 5 defense all season long. There have been a few peaks and valleys as there are with any team, but by and large, we know what this team can do on the defensive end, and I think that's certainly going to translate to the playoffs when there's no back-to-backs and they're dialed in from a focus and effort perspective every game. It's the offensive end of the floor where the Rockets are middle of the pack that's been the issue this season. And so if you have the young, talented players they have and you pair it with a peak version of Fred VanVleet, that's when they are truly lethal and can beat really good teams. The question is, how do the Rockets get that version of Fred? And so you can shut him down the final 5 games. You can play him some and not others. Maybe you sit him down on the front end. Maybe you sit him down on the back end. Maybe you play him, but you limit his minutes. There's multiple ways you can go about it. But I think getting the best version of Fred VanVleet needs to be the focus for the Rockets down the home stretch of the year. I think it would be silly to bench him. Look, the intangibles are real, offensively, defensively, getting guys organized, communicating, putting players in the right spaces on the court. They're not, short of a serious injury, going to not play him. That would be silly. He is going to play, assuming he's reasonably healthy, reasonably being not any worse than most NBA players this time of year who have had soft tissue injuries and are dealing with something. He's going to play. We can talk about potentially limiting his minutes a little bit. What can they do with his specific role and the spots he goes to on the floor? How much does he initiate the offense versus Jalen and the men? Sure, we can talk about those things, but he's going to play. It's about how do you bring out the best version of him? And that's important because, again, some of their best wins this year were when they had Fred at his best. Let's not act like they don't need him. So for me, that's the focus down the home stretch of this year. How do they get Fred ready for the playoffs? Because I think Amen, by and large, coming off the ankle injury, has looked like himself. They don't have any injury concerns elsewhere. There's no more back-to-back, so you don't have to worry about Tari anymore. So knock on wood, assuming nobody turns an ankle, and I think the Rockets will and should be pretty cautious to try and avoid excessive injury risk over the final 10 days or so. They're in a good spot. They're playing their best ball. The one guy with the question, in my opinion, is Fred VanVleet. And so that needs to be the focus for them. They're at a point where they're not going to shut things down and say, oh, we've secured our spot. No, they have not mathematically clinched even home court advantage yet. So there is still something to play for. They also want to remain sharp. They're not going to take their foot off the gas, but you can be strategic. And that's what I want to see them do with Fred VanVleet. Because outside of Fred, this is a healthy roster and it's a good roster. You know, we've talked about their struggles without Fred when he was out in February, but honestly, you have to remember that in that stretch he missed in February and in early March as well, when he went out after re-aggravating the ankle, they were without Jabari the first 3 weeks of that. They had a ton of back-to-backs, so they're missing Tari half the time. They missed Amen after he went down with his own ankle issue in March. So as much as the Rockets struggled without Fred in that stretch, and you could certainly feel his absence, he was not the only guy that was out. Right now, everybody's back. There's no back-to-back, so you have Tari fully available. So you can be a little more conservative with Fred. I don't think it is as desperate of a situation in terms of how this team functions without Fred VanVleet. I'm not going to say that because they look great against Utah that you don't need him and that's going to translate against, the Thunder on Friday night. That would be silly. The Jazz are terrible. Just because the Rockets won without Fred and did so easily against the Jazz doesn't mean anything as far as these 5 strong teams that they're going to play down the home stretch of the year. That would be an overreaction. However, I do think it would also be an overreaction to attribute all of their struggles in the month of February and to some extent in early March before they started turning things around to not having Fred VanVleet because they were missing a lot of other players at that time as well. Now, you've got a healthy roster outside of Fred. You can lean on those guys a little bit more down the home stretch of the year and get Fred right. because for this team to be at its best, for them to have a chance in the playoffs against good teams, they're going to need him, and he's going to play. It's not realistic to shut him down unless he literally can't walk. He's a gamer. He takes his responsibility seriously as the leader of this team. And as we just saw in Miami on the road against a team that's playing for something, when he's right, he can go out and win you a game. He is that good, especially when you pair him with the level of defense that Ime Udoka has this Rockets team playing at this season. They just have to figure out how to get the best version of Fred out more consistently. And so that's where managing him down the home stretches this year is going to be really, really important. Anyway, that will do it for today's mini cast episode of The Logger Line. Just wanted to hit a few themes. I think primarily it's a wonderful day that you should celebrate. The one word of caution that I would have going down the home stretch of the year involves the health of Fred VanVleet. And so for me, my focus is going to be on making sure or hoping that the Rockets make sure that they can get that as the calendar turns to mid-April and we get ready for playoff basketball in Houston starting April 19th or April 20th. Anyway, with that, we'll wrap things for today. And if you want more content before our next show, which should have Paolo when he gets back from vacation, the best place to get that is online. You can follow me on Twitter or X at Ben Dubose and the show at The Logger Line. If you go to the Logger Line's page, you can find our link tree, which has all of the links to our distribution partners like Apple, Google, and Spotify. If you'd be kind enough to subscribe, leave a positive review at your location of choice, we greatly appreciate it. Also, on that same link tree, you can find links to friends, sponsors, partners of the program, USA Today's Rockets Wire, Carbach Brewing, Sports Talk 790. Hit those links and you can enjoy their content as well. So with the plugs complete, I will adjourn for today. As always, I appreciate you so much for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Logger Line. Go Rockets.